Opal by Jack Stauber is a claymation short originally aired on Adult Swim, though it's found a lingering audience here on YouTube. This short centers around a little girl, presumably Opal, who encounters a family across the street that are clearly not right. Jack Stauber is most well known for his work in the music industry, creating songs with very unique sound design that can be a little off-putting for some. While the songs themselves often have a more upbeat tempo, the sound can be almost haunting. This is present in Opal, with the musical numbers in the short having the same slightly off-kilter sense of strangeness. Before the title screen, we get flashes of different things. Pills and wine bottles strewn about a table together, cigarettes and beer cans sitting around a TV remote, makeup and mirrors, leading into the title of the short, Opal. It opens up with a little girl sitting at a kitchen table with her family, mother, father, and grandfather. They're all smiles, being warm and welcoming to her. Their words and expressions show love and pride in their daughter, who they present with a hamburger. Strangely, instead of eating it, she decides to dance, which her family applauds. She's distracted by the sight of the house across the street, a dark, gloomy-looking building. But there's an attic that she hears some strange, almost angelic music coming from. Her family quickly tries to redirect her attention, telling her to pay no attention to the house. After she's sent to bed, her curiosity gets the better of her and she sneaks out, going to the house across the street. She's startled by some lights coming on and rushes into the house, where we meet the first of the occupants. An old blind man sits in front of a TV, clearly having a lot of difficulty breathing, surrounded by trash. Opal tries very quietly to sneak across the room, but steps on one of the many pieces of garbage, the sound immediately catching the man's attention. He assumes that she's Claire, his granddaughter, and demands that she bring him his cigarettes, saying that she better not hide them because he knows it's her that's been doing it. Opal picks up a pack that is sitting on the floor and starts bringing it over to him when the man breaks into a song about how life just seems better on TV. It sounds easy for the people there to breathe, and he's able to convince himself that the people on TV are his friends and genuinely care about him, rather than being actors who don't know him at all. He fantasizes about living life in a TV show where everything seems so easy and turns out all right in the end. At the end of the song, he suddenly becomes agitated, declaring that Opal isn't his granddaughter and falling out of his chair while screaming at her to get out of his house, trying to chase her, though he apparently can't walk. Opal runs away, up the stairs and into a hallway. She tries to quietly sneak by the first open doorway, but someone calls out to her, grabbing her attention. It's a man, much younger than the elderly one downstairs, who is surrounded by mirrors, so absorbed in looking at himself that he doesn't even once look at Opal. He has an entire conversation with himself, talking all about his looks, even insulting Opal, or Claire, as he seems to think she is, saying that he's glad he doesn't have her ankles. While he seems to be talking up his looks a lot, he's also somewhat unkind to himself, at least to his own intelligence. He seems to believe that the only thing he has going for him are his looks, so he desperately has to maintain them. He goes into a musical number about how desperate he is for people to notice him, how he has to maintain perfection in his looks because nothing else matters in his life but looking good and getting attention. During the song, we get some glimpses into a mirror that show a distorted, disfigured face. It's hinted that this is what he really looks like, and he's suffered severe physical abuse that he's desperate to cover up with all the makeup, convincing himself that he's still beautiful and perfect. At the end of his song, the old man makes it to the top of the stairs, yelling, frightening Opal into running away again and into another room, closing the door behind her. This room is full of trash as well, to the extent that Opal can't even tell there's a person in there until someone's hand grabs her ankle, making her fall. It turns out to be a drunk woman, presumably the man's wife, who is too drunk to see straight, and also calls Opal by the name Claire, who seems to be her daughter. She talks about feeling terrible. It seems like she nearly says, "I feel terrible for the things I've done," but she stops herself just before the last word, meekly repeating that she feels terrible. She tells Opal that women don't get to live, they only get to survive. A pretty grim outlook on life that likely is part of what drove her to drinking. How she got to that point in her life is unclear, but whatever she's been through has clearly affected her to the point that she's basically given up on happiness and just drinks herself into near unconsciousness just to get through the day. She sings a musical number about how she needs a little girl to basically act as her mother, reversing the dynamic that should be in place. She wants her daughter to be her therapist and caretaker, to give her the love and attention that she cannot provide for her own child, to fix things for her because she's given up trying to fix anything on her own. It's implied that she's also quite violent, certainly towards her husband and likely towards her daughter as well, and she regrets her actions, but not enough to actually stop herself from doing it again. She feels bad, but rather than taking responsibility for those bad feelings, she just takes it out on the people around her who can't or won't fight back, then feels bad about it again in what turns into a vicious cycle of endless pain. Opal manages to get away from her and runs away again, getting to the attic room where the strange music was coming from. All three adults go after her, banging on the door and yelling at her while she blocks the door with a chair. Looking around the room, we can see a small mattress on the floor, but otherwise the room seems bare. The only notable thing being a window on the far wall, which Opal quickly runs to, looking out. Across the street, she can see a billboard featuring the family that she was with at the beginning of the short, standing around a much plumper, happier-looking little girl, advertising Opal's Burgers. This is where we realize that she isn't Opal at all. She really is Claire, and the family at the beginning were just a happy daydream of hers. The yelling, demanding, threatening people pounding on the door of the attic, those are her real family. The strange music she followed up to the attic has mixed meaning depending on who you ask. Some people seem to think it's because the attic represents safety, however little it may be. That's her room, a place she can block the door and hopefully be safe until her family members lose interest and wander off again. Other people interpret the music as actually being the sound of crying, her own crying, which sounds more like music in the dreams she makes up just to get through another day. The lights that scared her into the house were likely the billboard lights coming on, signaling that it was too late in the evening for her to stay outside anymore. She falls to her knees, covering her head and crying out at the realization that there is no Opal, no happy family. It's all fake. Until she seems to wake up again in the house with the family we saw at the beginning, who all start singing to her again about how they see her and her troubles are miles away. Rather than face reality, she has chosen once again to dive into the fantasy world where she is safe and loved, in a warm home rather than in a cold attic with self-obsessed lunatics clawing at the door, demanding her attention. This short is clearly about child neglect. Claire is obviously not being taken care of properly. It's hard to tell whether it's just the style of the claymation or not, but comparing Claire to the little girl on the billboard and the appearances of everyone else, she looks much skinnier than them, implying she's badly malnourished. This might be why she doesn't eat the burgers she's given at the beginning. If she tried to and couldn't, it might shatter the illusion of the happy life she's built for herself. This poor girl is the victim of different types of neglect, personified in each adult she encounters. The old man, her grandfather, is helpless, a slob, and clearly can't take care of himself at all, much less anyone else. He just sits in front of a TV all day listening to it, demanding that others around him provide for him. How much of his physical disability is self-inflicted or just age is unclear, but either way, he's pretty much useless. He accuses Claire of hiding his cigarettes, even though in all likelihood he just dropped them or misplaced them and couldn't find them again due to being blind, blaming her for nothing. He's very overweight, so clearly he's been able to eat just fine, even though it looks like no one is making sure Claire gets fed. Likely he makes one of Claire's parents, or Claire herself, look after him. The stress of having to deal with a dependent, demanding parent might be part of what drives Claire's mother into drinking. Caretaker burnout is a very real thing, and it can destroy families when one person needs or demands constant care that the rest of the household isn't really capable of providing. especially if the person being taken care of is ungrateful for it and does nothing but demand more. Her father, the man in the bathroom, is too absorbed with himself to bother looking after his daughter. He's not outright cruel to her, besides insults like saying he's glad he doesn't have her ankles, which he quickly says aren't really bad or anything before changing the subject again. He's a textbook narcissist, too obsessed with himself and his own desires to notice or care about what's happening around him. It's also possible that he's an abuse victim as well, likely abused by his alcoholic wife, and descending into his own little world where he's all that matters is part of how he protects himself, rather than dealing with the issues head on and doing something about it, like taking his daughter and getting away from the others in the house. He doesn't notice what his daughter is going through because he doesn't even see her. He only sees himself. In his mind, he is the main character, and everyone else is just an NPC there to push his story along, much like how many narcissistic jerks who make TikToks with what they call pranks but are actually assault and other crimes seem to see the people around them as. In their mind, nothing they do to other people matters because they're the only ones who matters, and it's a shock to them when they do something bad and people retaliate. To them, it's unfair for them to be punished for anything they do because they think they're the only person who has actual feelings and thoughts. They consciously know better, but they certainly don't seem to understand it on a deeper level and completely lack any kind of empathy. Claire's mother is obviously a drunk who has given up on life and can't be bothered to take care of her daughter, or, by her appearance, herself. She has some glimmers of self-awareness that almost push through, but quickly shuts them down, refusing to actually voice her own guilt and claiming herself as a victim. This is an example of weaponized victimhood. Even though she is causing her own problems, at least to some extent, and she's actively hurting those around her, including a child who has no way of protecting themselves or getting away from her, she refuses to accept any responsibility for it and chalks it up to that being the price she pays for being a woman, as if her gender is the reason she's an abusive drunk. She is parentifying her daughter and expecting a child to take care of her, reversing the roles that they should be in. As the adult, she should be the caretaker and guide, helping her daughter learn to navigate the world and be a good person. It should absolutely not be the child's responsibility to take care of her and try to hold her life together. She made the choices that brought her to this point in her life, not her daughter. But she's going to blame everyone and everything but herself and continue digging the hole she's put herself in deeper and deeper, all the while dragging anyone else she can down with her, especially the helpless child who has no way to escape. Claire seems to have a similar escape from all this as her grandfather does. While he lets himself sink into TV shows and convinces himself that the people in the shows are his best friends and adore him, Claire spends her days staring at a billboard of a happy family and imagining herself as part of that family. Somewhere that is safe, where people love her and care for her, where she is given food and treated like someone who matters. The only way she can make it through the day is with delusions of escape and a loving family she knows she can never really have. This short hit pretty hard for me in particular because, well, I used to do the same thing as a kid, and if I'm being completely honest, I still do it sometimes. When the places I lived as a child had TV, it was usually only the kind that you could get 1 or 2 local channels on. The big boxes with the antenna that would pick up local news and stations that usually played old westerns or religious shows. I grew up watching Bonanza and listening to Tales of the Texas Rangers and other shows like that, and I spent so much of my time hiding away by myself, imagining that I was the Cartwright boys' little sister, surrounded by people who cared about me and would beat the tar out of anyone who tried to hurt me instead of turning their anger on me themselves. I'd imagine scenarios where I escaped where I was and got picked up by Jace Pearson, the Texas Ranger, and adopted by him or the sheriff and got to help them solve crimes. When I was able to watch cartoons like Batman or Gargoyles, I'd imagine different scenarios where I was in with them. Even ones that sometimes weren't entirely happy, but were at least better than where I was living at the time, like being one of the people that Xanatos turned into the cat gargoyles, or being orphaned in Gotham and finding my way to Wayne Manor. Maybe being found digging through the trash by Alfred and being taken in and accidentally finding out Bruce's secret identity and joining the Bat family. A lot of the scenarios I imagined, and sometimes still do, involved me being hurt or sick to a point where whoever was around me had to take care of me. And they wouldn't be angry about having to do so or ignore me just to leave me to suffer. But they'd actually take care of me well because they wanted to and genuinely wanted me to get better. I think spending so much of my time as a kid daydreaming is part of why I got pretty good at storytelling and writing. I was always making up narratives in my head about escaping where I was and finding somewhere better, even if there were bumps along the way, so naturally it wasn't hard for me to come up with other stories too. It may even be part of why I'm not very good at writing drama or angst. Those were things I always avoided, unless it was a comforting kind of angst, like someone being near death from an injury and someone else coming along and saving them and tending to them. I always tend to write stories that are more comedic or that center around comfort because, well, that's what I desperately needed as a kid and often still do. That's what my stories about myself always focused on. Someone actually caring enough about me to look after me and be invested in my happiness. There are even ones sometimes where something really bad happens to me, like I get fatally injured or end up sacrificing myself to help everyone else. But that part turns into, for lack of a better term, a happy ending as well, because the people around me are actually genuinely upset that I'm gone and actually miss me, which is pretty depressing that the part that makes it a happy ending is that people actually give a crap that I'm dead. When I'm particularly stressed out or I'm just spacing out and not focused on anything in particular, my brain tends to start making up those scenarios again, usually featuring characters from whatever media I happen to be invested in at the time. In most of those daydreams, or sometimes actual dreams, I almost always end up being a little kid again, young enough that the adults around me are expected to take care of me instead of expecting me to take care of myself alone or to take care of them. Sure, I have plenty of daydreams involving my actual adult self too, or a more idealized adult form of myself, but most of the time, if it's not something I'm somewhat actively thinking about and it's just sort of a thing my brain is doing at the moment, I'm almost always a little kid. Most of the time when I have actual sleeping dreams, if I'm an adult in those dreams, either everything that's happening is total nonsense or something bad is happening. It's kind of embarrassing to think about my biggest escape being to turn back into a little kid and have people genuinely invested in taking care of me, but I think this is something that a lot of people, especially those who went through situations like the ones I did when I was a kid, can relate to, even if it's not generally something we talk about very much. This, along with my financial situation, health issues, the state of the world, and other things, is one of the big reasons why I chose to never have children. I never want to be the kind of person that makes a child feel like the only place they have to escape to is in their own head. I don't feel like I would be a reliable caretaker for a child and their emotional needs. I can take care of animals just fine, great even, but they don't have the same kind of psychological needs as a child does, and the last thing I'd ever want to do is make a child feel the same way that the adults around me made me feel when I was too small to do anything about it. Parents should never, ever make their children feel like they need to be the caretakers in the household, whether it's the older kids taking care of the younger ones, the girls having to look after and clean up after the boys, or the kids having to look after their parents. That should never, ever be the case. It is not their responsibility. The people who chose to have children are the ones who are responsible, not the kids. They are the ones who need to step up and give their children the best start in life they can. And if they're incapable of doing it themselves, then they need to admit defeat and find someone else who can actually give those children the care they need, or not have any to begin with. Having a child should never be a band-aid for your own problems, like being lonely and wanting someone who has no choice but to be with you, or wanting someone who will look after you, or to trap a partner into staying with you. The only good reason to have a child is because you genuinely want to be a parent and are fully prepared to do the best job possible to raise a healthy, happy person who can go on to live their own life, taking their own strides out into the world and knowing they have a safe place to land if they slip. If you can't or won't do that, then you have no business being a parent. I'm sorry this one took so long to come out. I keep saying that, I know. but I have a lot of stuff going on right now. The repairs to my truck would cost more than it was worth, and I wasn't able to get enough for it for a down payment on anything, so I've been trying to scrimp and save enough for a down payment on just about anything. I'm even considering buying a stick shift car that's going fairly cheap nearby, even though I don't know how to drive stick. Just trying to learn it on my own so I have something I can get around with. I also have surgery coming up soon, so I've been trying to stock up on groceries since I won't be able to make the walk to the store a few miles away while I'm healing. And generally just trying to figure out logistics for various things going on right now. I also had to pause while recording this a few times, especially when getting into some really personal stuff. It's a lot that I try not to think about very much, but I am trying to be more honest with myself and dissect my own coping mechanisms and all to work through things. It's not easy, especially when new stresses like worrying about finding a car and work and making rent and the state of politics and the world in general are all bearing down at the same time and just adding to it constantly. But I will be trying to get more videos out soon, even if they're just short story readings rather than analysis and reviews. Thank you for joining me for another one. Be safe out there, be kind to yourself and those around you, and I'll see you in the next one.